Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. As we head into the holiday season this year, there's one thing that's probably on everyone's mind, and it's definitely been on mine.
Yeah.
How to enjoy the holidays
Uh,
without waking up in January with a massive holiday spending hangover,
oh, yeah.
especially
Especially in 2025.
2025
Yeah.
when things are a little, well,
Yeah, a little tight.
tight for everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, so, we're all feeling the pinch.
Yeah.
But how do we balance that holiday cheer with staying financially sane?
Right.
That's what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, budgeting. It's really about understanding the psychology behind why we spend the way we do during the holidays and making smarter choices that don't leave us feeling drained,
Right.
financially and emotionally.
Totally. So let's get into it. What does the holiday spending landscape even look like this year? I was reading that people are planning to spend a bit less than usual.
Yeah.
Is that really the case?
Yeah. The data shows that pretty clearly. On average, people are aiming to keep their gift spending somewhere between $500 and $600, which is definitely down from previous years.
Wow. That's a pretty significant drop.
Yeah.
Why? Is it just because everyone's feeling the economic squeeze, or is there something else going on?
Well, I think you have to think about it with, the way the economy and politics are these days.
Mhm.
It's not a surprise that people are being more cautious with their money.
Right.
It's like this subconscious ripple effect, even if we don't realize it's happening.
Right. It's kind of like that whole mood of the nation thing, right?
Totally. Yeah.
If everyone is feeling uncertain, it's going to show up in our spending habits.
Exactly.
But are people just like ditching the big retailers altogether? Are we seeing a shift away from those big names?
I wouldn't say ditching them entirely.
Okay.
Those big names like Amazon and Walmart and Target, they're still the go-to for most people.
Okay.
But what is interesting is that we're seeing a huge surge in deal hunting and online shopping. Like free shipping and all those online reviews are gold this year.
Yeah, they matter. People want to make sure they're getting a good deal.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. But even with all the deals, I read that a surprisingly large number of people are opting out of gift giving altogether this year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, you read that right. Over 1 in 3 Americans are planning to skip gifts entirely this year because of inflation.
Wow.
That's huge.
1 in 3.
It's a huge shift in behavior.
Yeah.
And it really speaks volumes about the pressure people are feeling.
Yeah. That statistic really hit home for me. I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was saying that she and her family, they're doing like a Secret Santa this year instead of,
Yeah.
buying individual gifts for everybody.
Right.
It seems like people are having to get creative to make the holidays work on a budget.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about saving money, it's about recognizing that the true spirit on the holidays goes beyond just exchanging presents. But here's the thing, even with the best intentions, a lot of us, we struggle with managing our money effectively,
Yeah.
especially during the holidays.
Right.
In fact, there's data showing that a lot of people end up actually losing money simply because they don't have that basic financial knowledge.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying that people are literally losing money because they just don't know how to manage it?
It's a tough reality. Think about it this, way back in 2021, the average American lost almost $1,400
Wow.
because of a lack of financial literacy.
Ouch.
That's like a weekend getaway or a new phone
Yeah.
or paying off a chunk of debt just because you didn't have the tools to manage your money.
Right. And speaking of potential money pits,
Yeah.
let's talk about these buy now, pay later programs.
Oh, yeah.
BNPL. They're everywhere these days.
It's everywhere.
But I have a feeling they're not as good as they sound.
Right.
So break it down for me. What is a BNPL program and why are they so risky?
Okay, so while they might seem tempting, especially during the holidays when we're all trying to make our budgets work,
Right.
BNPL programs can be incredibly risky
Okay.
and trap you in this cycle of debt that's really hard to escape.
So what happens if you fall behind on those payments?
Well, the consequences can be pretty severe. 72% of people who fall behind on those BNPL payments see their credit scores plummet.
Wow.
And 25% actually end up in more debt than when they started.
Oh, wow.
Not to mention the stress of juggling all those payments
Yeah.
and potentially missing essential bills just to keep up.
It's almost like those programs are designed to take advantage of people when they're already feeling stretched thin.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really crucial to ask yourself, are those deals really worth the potential long-term consequences, both financially and emotionally?
That is such a good question, and it's a really important one.
Yeah.
But how do we even begin to make smarter choices when it comes to holiday spending?
Yeah.
We are constantly bombarded with messages telling us to buy, buy, buy.
It's true, but the good news is we actually have more control than we think. It all starts with understanding ourselves and how we typically approach the whole holiday shopping thing.
Hmm.
We've identified 5 distinct holiday shopper profiles, and chances are you'll recognize yourself in at least one of them.
Okay.
The early bird,
Okay.
the overspender,
Uh-huh.
the twofer,
Okay.
the bargain hunter, and the last-minute shopper.
This is starting to sound like a personality test, but for our wallets.
Right.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these different shopper types.
Okay, so let's take the early bird, for example. They're the ones who start shopping early. They
Okay.
plan their purchases carefully.
Right.
They usually stick to a budget. But even they need to be careful about those early Black Friday deals that are popping up earlier and earlier every year.
Hmm. Yeah, it's tempting to jump on a deal,
Right.
even if you weren't planning on buying that thing.
Exactly. Okay, what about the overspenders? I'm guessing these are the folks who end up with a lot of credit card debt come January.
Yeah, probably.
They're often driven by that desire to, shower their loved ones with gifts. But sometimes that generosity comes at a pretty steep price.
Yeah.
The key for the overspender is to look back at past spending habits and identify those regret purchases.
Those impulse buys that you never end up using.
Exactly.
Or giving away.
Exactly. Once you've identified those spending traps, it's time to set a firm spending limit.
Okay.
And this is going to sound a little crazy, but consider cutting that budget maybe even by 50%.
50%. Okay, that's a big cut.
It is.
But I guess if you're trying to break that cycle,
Exactly.
yeah, it makes sense. Okay, what about the twofer? What's that all about?
Okay, so the twofer, these are the masters of the treat-yourself mentality. They're buying gifts for everyone else, but somehow they always end up with a little something for themselves along the way.
Oh, I know that type.
Right. So for the twofer, the key is to prioritize financial security. Unless you are in a really solid place financially, avoid splurging on yourself when you're out shopping for others.
Yeah, those little treats can add up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's move on to the bargain hunters.
All right, the bargain hunter.
These sound like my kind of people.
Always looking for a good deal.
Yeah.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those are their Super Bowls. But here's the thing, even for the bargain hunter, it's really important to remember that a sale doesn't always equal savings.
Okay, so just because something is 50% off doesn't mean you actually need it.
Exactly. The key for the bargain hunter is to stay focused on what they need, not just what seems like a good deal.
Right.
It's all about asking yourself, would I buy this if it wasn't on sale?
That is such a good point. You get so caught up in the sale. Okay, let's talk about the last-minute shopper.
Oh, the last-minute shopper.
I know a few of those.
The adrenaline junkies of the holiday shopping world,
Yeah.
they thrive under pressure,
Yeah.
waiting until the very last minute to get everything done. But that last-minute rush can lead to impulse buys and overspending.
Totally. When you're stressed and pressed for time, it's easy to just grab whatever and worry about the consequences later. So how can those last-minute shoppers avoid falling into that trap?
The key is to have a plan, even if it's a simple one.
Okay.
Make a list. Set a budget for each person and stick to it. Maybe set a timer even to limit your shopping time.
Yeah, so you don't get sidetracked.
Exactly.
That's a great idea. Okay, so we've uncovered all these different holiday shopper personalities.
Yes.
What's the next step? How do we actually put all this into practice and have like a more mindful and financially healthy holiday season?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And that is what we're going to dive into next.
Awesome.
It's all about getting proactive and exploring some guilt-free strategies for a truly meaningful holiday season. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we figured out what kind of holiday shopper we are. Now, how do we actually make this holiday season less about stressing over spending and more about, the things that actually matter?
Yeah, it's about shifting that focus away from all the material possessions and towards the experiences and the connections that really make memories.
Yeah. I love that it's about making the holidays more about presents than presents.
Right?
Honestly, with all the marketing and all the pressure everywhere we look, it's hard to escape that trap of thinking that we need to buy all the things to make it special. So how do we break free from that?
Well, one thing you can do is think outside the gift box. Literally Instead of those standard material gifts, why not think about gifting an experience?
Oh,
Tickets to a concert or a show, a cooking class, a weekend getaway, even a subscription to a museum or a streaming service.
yeah.
Those shared experiences can create really lasting memories and strengthen the bonds with people in a way that, a sweater or a gadget just can't.
Oh, I love that idea. It's about creating moments, not clutter.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be expensive either.
Right.
A hike in a beautiful park, a board game night, a family movie marathon.
Mm.
Those are all experiences that create memories.
Exactly. And let's not forget about homemade gifts. A scarf, you knitted a batch of cookies, a photo collage you put together. Those are infused with so much thoughtfulness
Yeah.
and effort that makes them so much more special.
Yeah, you're making me think of this really beautiful quilt that my aunt made for me a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
She used photos from our family vacations that she had printed on fabric.
Oh, how cool.
And it's honestly one of my most prized possessions.
Yeah.
It's so much more meaningful than anything she could bought from a store.
Right. Those are the things that become family heirlooms.
Yeah.
You pass them down. And speaking of traditions, maybe this is the year to start some new ones that are more about connection than all this stuff.
Oh, I'm so on board with that. What kind of traditions could people try out?
Well, instead of doing a traditional gift exchange, how about like a talent show where everyone shows off a skill or a hobby?
Oh, fun.
Or a family volunteering day where you all go give back to your community together.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Right. It's about shifting the focus from receiving to giving and creating that shared purpose.
Yeah, and those alternative traditions, I bet they end up being more fun and meaningful than the whole, gift-giving scramble.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot less stress on everyone's wallet.
Way less stress, exactly. And less stress during the holidays is always a good thing.
Always a good thing because it's supposed to be a time of joy and celebration, not financial anxiety.
Exactly right. Speaking of financial well-being, another thing we should all be really mindful of during the holidays is protecting ourselves from scams.
Oh, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even thought about that. What are some things that we should look out for?
Well, one thing to be wary of is any unsolicited emails or social media messages that offer, deals that just seem too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because often those lead to those fake websites that are designed to steal your information.
So always double check the URL and make sure it's legit before you put in any payment information.
Exactly. And be cautious of any charities that you're not familiar with, especially those that pressure you to donate right away. Do your research, make sure those contributions are going to reputable places.
Also a good idea to stick to secure payment methods like credit cards that offer more fraud protection than debit cards.
Absolutely. Another important tip is to check your bank accounts and your credit card statements frequently throughout the season.
Yeah.
That way, you can catch any unauthorized transactions right away and take action.
It's all about being vigilant and proactive, and if something feels off, trust your gut and don't hesitate to report it to the authorities.
Absolutely. Protecting yourself from those scams is so important to keeping your finances safe during the holidays. But, even with the best intentions, sometimes we slip up and overspend.
Right.
But it doesn't have to ruin the whole season.
Yeah, that's so true. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement and overspend a little bit. So what can we do if we find ourselves in that position? How do we recover and get back on track?
Well, first of all, I think it's super important to acknowledge that overspending happens. It's not a sign of failure. It doesn't have to define you. The key is to approach it with self-compassion and a plan.
That's such a relief to hear. It's so easy to spiral into the guilt and the shame after overspending. But you're right, that doesn't help anyone. I think we need to normalize talking about this stuff, especially after the holidays when there's so much pressure to spend.
Absolutely. And if you're in that position where you're facing a mountain of debt after the holidays, remember, you are not alone.
Yeah.
There are strategies to manage that debt and get back on track.
So we touched on the snowball principle a little earlier, but could you break that down again for our listeners? It's all about tackling the debt with the highest interest rate first, even if it's the biggest amount.
Right. So with the snowball method, you actually focus on the smallest debt first.
Whoa.
So you list out all your debts, smallest to largest, regardless of interest rate, and you focus on paying off that smallest one first while making minimum payments on everything else.
So it's about getting that quick win.
Exactly, that quick win to boost your motivation. And once you've paid off that smallest debt, you roll the money you were putting toward that into the next smallest debt, and so on.
So like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a blind trick to keep you going. But what about those high-interest debts? Doesn't it make more sense financially to pay those off first?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's where the avalanche method comes in. So instead of the smallest, you target the debt with the highest interest rate, regardless of how big or small the balance is. This is going to save you the most money on interest charges over time.
So it sounds like it's really about finding what works for you.
Exactly.
If you need that quick motivational boost snowball method,
Yeah.
if you are in it for the long haul and you want to save the most money, maybe the avalanche method.
Absolutely. It's about finding a strategy that you can actually stick with.
That's motivating, right?
Exactly. No one right way to do it.
Okay, what about balance transfers? Is that a good option for managing all that post-holiday debt?
They can be helpful, but again, you've got to approach them strategically.
Yeah.
So you're basically moving your high interest credit card debt to a card with a lower interest rate,
Okay,
which can save you money on those interest charges and help you pay it off faster.
that sounds pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any downsides?
Yeah, you've got to read all that fine print. Make sure you really understand the terms.
Okay.
Some balance transfer cards have fees that sometimes eat up the savings from the lower rate.
Right.
And be mindful of that introductory period.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those cards will offer you a really low or even 0% interest rate for a certain amount of time.
Right.
But after that, the rate can really jump up.
Okay, so it's not a magic solution. You got to really do your research and make sure it's the right move for you.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things that might sound too good to be true, those buy now, pay later plans we talked about earlier,
Oh, yeah.
they can seem like an easy way to manage spending during the holidays,
Yep.
but they can be a really slippery slope to debt.
Absolutely. Those BNPL plans are essentially loans. Right. Even if they don't always market them that way. So just like any other loan, you've got to consider what it means in the long term.
Right.
Are you really getting a deal, or are you just delaying the inevitable?
Right.
And potentially ending up with even more debt?
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that instant gratification, especially during the holidays.
Mm.
But sometimes the best thing you can do for your finances is just say no.
Exactly. And beyond all of those practical strategies, let's not forget about our mindset.
Mm.
Cultivating a sense of gratitude and really focusing on those non-material parts of the holidays can be so powerful
Yeah.
because it can help shift our perspective and reduce that urge to overspend in the first place.
That's such a good reminder. True wealth is not measured by the number of gifts under the tree or the size of your credit card bill.
Exactly.
It's the experiences, the relationships, that sense of well-being that comes from living within your means,
Couldn't have said it better myself.
making choices that align with your values, right?
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up this dive into navigating the holidays without that financial hangover, let's recap a few of the key takeaways.
Okay, so first, understand your spending patterns and create a realistic budget that you can actually stick with.
Number 2, get creative and explore those different ways to celebrate that don't require spending a ton of money.
And prioritize self-care. Don't be afraid to set boundaries with people who pressure you to overspend.
And lastly, if you do overspend, be kind to yourself. It's not a failure. Make a plan to manage that debt and get back on track.
The holidays are a time for joy, connection, and gratitude. Let's make sure our financial choices reflect those values.
Remember, true wealth is about those experiences, relationships, and that overall sense of well-being.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into holiday spending. We hope you found these tips helpful.
We wish you a happy, healthy, and financially savvy holiday season.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into how to have happy holidays without the financial hangover. We've talked about figuring out our spending habits, exploring some creative gift alternatives, and how to protect ourselves from those holiday scams. But now what about after the holidays, when the decorations come down and those credit card bills start coming in?
It's kind of like the after-party cleanup, right?
Yeah.
The post-holiday reality check.
Uh-huh.
But even if you did overspend, it's so important to remember that it doesn't have to ruin your whole year. It's really about approaching those post-holiday finances with a clear plan and some self-compassion.
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of people need to hear. It's easy to get caught up in guilt and shame after overspending, but really that doesn't help anyone. What we need to do is normalize talking about these financial challenges, especially after the holidays when the pressure to spend can feel so huge.
Totally agree. And, if you do find yourself facing those post-holiday bills, remember, you're not alone. There are tons of strategies for managing it and getting back on track.
So speaking of strategies, we talked about the snowball principle earlier. Could you break that down one more time for everyone listening? I think it's a really helpful concept, but can be a little confusing to understand at first.
Absolutely. The snowball method is all about building momentum and getting that sense of accomplishment as you start to pay off those debts. So basically, you make a list of all of your debts, from the smallest to the largest, regardless of the interest rate. Then you focus on paying off that smallest debt first while making just the minimum payments on all the others.
So you get that quick win to boost your motivation.
Exactly. Once that first small debt is paid off, you take the money you were putting toward that and roll it into the next smallest debt, and so on and so on. Just like a snowball rolling downhill, picking up speed as it goes.
It's like a little mind game to keep you moving forward.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about those higher interest debts? Doesn't it make more sense financially speaking to tackle those first and save money in the long run?
You are so right, and that's where the avalanche method can really come in handy. So instead of focusing on the smallest debt first, you actually prioritize the one with the highest interest rate, regardless of how big or small that balance is. And this approach will save you the most money on interest charges over time.
So it sounds like it comes down to finding what works best for you and your situation.
Exactly.
If you need that quick win, that motivation boost, the snowball method might be a good fit.
Right.
But if you want to save the most money in the long run, maybe avalanche is the way to go.
Totally. It's all about picking a plan and sticking with it. And one that motivates you. There's no one right way to do it.
Okay, cool. So what about balance transfers? Are those a good option for tackling post-holiday debt?
Balance transfers can definitely be a good tool, but it's important to be strategic about them. So you're basically taking your high-interest credit card debt and transferring it to a card with a lower interest rate,
Okay.
which can potentially save you money on those interest charges and help you pay everything off a little bit faster.
Okay, so that sounds pretty straightforward. But are there any downsides to balance transfers?
The biggest thing is to really read that fine print and make sure you understand the terms. Some cards come with fees that can eat up the savings from the lower rate.
Right.
And watch out for that introductory period. A lot of those balance transfer cards will offer a really low or even 0% interest rate,
Yeah,
but only for a certain amount of time.
right.
Once that time is up, the rate can go way up.
So it's not a magic solution. You really have to do your research and make sure it's the right move for you.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things that might sound a little too good to be true, those buy now, pay later plans.
Right.
They can seem like a simple way to manage spending during the holidays, but can also be a bit of a trap when it comes to debt.
Definitely, because those BNPL plans are basically loans, even if they don't always present them that way. Just like any other loan, you have to think about what it means in the long run. Are you really getting a deal, or are you just pushing the problem down the road and potentially ending up with more debt?
It's so tempting to go for that instant gratification, especially during the holidays. But sometimes the best thing you can do for your finances is just say no.
You got it. And beyond all of these practical strategies, let's not forget about mindset.
Oh, right.
Cultivating gratitude and really focusing on the non-material parts of the holidays can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because it helps shift our perspective and sometimes even reduces that urge to overspend in the first place.
Yeah, that's such an important reminder. True wealth isn't about how many gifts are under the tree or how big your credit card bill is.
Exactly.
It's about the experiences, the relationships, and the well-being that comes from living within your means.
Absolutely. I love that.
It's about making choices that match your values, right?
Yeah, exactly. So to wrap up this deep dive into navigating the holidays without ending up in debt, let's go over a few key takeaways.
So number one, understand your spending patterns and create a realistic budget that works for you.
Number two, think outside the box and explore those different ways to celebrate that don't require spending tons of money.
Number three, prioritize self-care and don't be afraid to set boundaries with people who might pressure you to overspend.
And lastly, if overspending happens, go easy on yourself. It's not a failure. Come up with a plan to manage that debt and get back on track. You got this.
The holidays are all about joy, connection, and gratitude. So let's make sure our financial choices reflect those values.
Remember, true wealth is about those experiences, relationships, and a sense of overall well-being, not about stuff.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into holiday spending. We hope you learned a few things and that you have a happy, healthy, and financially savvy holiday season.
Absolutely, and happy holidays, everyone.